Excellent. So, Deb, I think just to sort of kick us off, would be good to do a round of introductions. Would you be happy to just do a brief summary of who you are, what you do at Second Nature, and also your favorite meal?
Oh, oh. Okay. So my name is Deborah. I'm a dietitian and health coach here at Second Nature. I've been working at Second Nature now for about 6 years and working on the weight loss medication program for about the last 2 years or so. So I've guided quite a few of our members using Wegovy and also Mounjaro.
Nice.
Favorite meal is probably Thai green curry in Thailand. It's got to be in Thailand.
Mm.
Although there's a very good one close to us that I've just discovered. But yeah, Thai green curry would be it, I think.
Nice. Whereabouts in Thailand did you have your best green curry?
Oh, that's a difficult one. Actually, it was camping in the middle of nowhere, on a
No way.
hike. Yeah, some our guy just pulled out a pan and made this amazing curry in the absolute middle of nowhere. It was yeah, phenomenal. I was probably very hungry after the hike, so it probably tasted better than it might have done otherwise.
Love that. That sounds so good. Thank you. And Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself, what you do at Second Nature, and also your favorite meal?
Right, well, hi everybody, I'm Rachel. I'm the doctor at Second Nature. Um, so yeah, I do everything, look after the clinical side of things at Second Nature. Um, my favourite meal, really boring, is overnight oats. That
Mm,
sounds really dull, doesn't it? But my
yeah,
breakfast, overnight oats, best meal of the day. Loads of fruit, nuts, dates, yogurt. Yeah, just really love it.
love it.
Every
Amazing.
day. Boring, but yeah.
No, not boring at all. Not boring at all. I love that. And I should introduce myself. My name is Robbie. I'm a registered nutritionist. And I also used to be one of the health coaches at Second Nature. I'm now the content lead. So for anyone who's here who's on the Second Nature program, I'm responsible for the articles that you hopefully enjoy. If not, let me know. Constructive feedback is always welcome. And for those of you who aren't with Second Nature, you might have read some of our articles on the website and I also write those as well. So it is 6 o'clock. So I think what we'll do is we will get cracking with the webinar. So we're right on time. Just to let everyone know, the webinar will be roughly 20 to 30 minutes. And there will be opportunities for Q&A at the end. There is a Q&A button just on the bottom of your screen. For those of you on your mobile, I don't know what it looks like, but there should be at least a menu of options at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and you can click more, or there might be just a Q&A button. If you want to chuck your questions into the Q&A section, we'll be able to keep track of them better because sometimes in the chat, if people put questions in, they can get lost and there's often other things going on in the chat, so it can be hard to keep track of the questions. So obviously, as we go, feel free to put stuff into the chat, but if you really want a question answered at the end of the webinar, we'll have about half an hour for those questions. Please put them in the Q&A. Okay, brilliant. I'll start sharing my screen. Okay, let's just get this out of the way. Right. Okay, Deborah, Rachel, was that all clear? Everything come through okay?
Yeah.
It's good, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, cool. So, welcome everyone to our webinar on switching from Mounjaro to Wegovy safely and everything you need to know. If you've just joined us and you missed the introductions, my name is Robbie Puddick. I'm one of the registered nutritionists and the content lead here at Second Nature. I'm also joined by Dr. Rachel Hall, our principal doctor at Second Nature, and Deborah Allen, a registered dietitian and one of our long-standing health coaches. Deborah, I think you've been with us for over 5 years now. Is that right?
Yeah, 6 years now.
6 years now. Okay, so yeah, one of our most senior health coaches, which is brilliant. So yeah, a fine clinical team to answer your questions at the end. So let's get to it. Yeah, just a quick disclaimer. This webinar is purely for informational purposes. It doesn't constitute medical advice. Any clinical decisions about your medication and what's right for you will always be guided by you and your prescriber or your GP. Yeah, we just wanted to provide some educational information for everyone at the moment, considering the recent events. So let's carry on. So what to expect from today. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's attending this webinar is very aware of what's been going on, but we'll just do a brief summary of sort of what happened, why the prices of Mounjaro or tirzepatide have increased in the UK. We'll look at the four options that most people have at the moment, and then we'll be covering the main topic of the webinar, which is one option that many people are asking us about, which is switching between Mounjaro and Wegovy and switching to Wegovy. We'll be looking at what the difference is between the two medications, and then we'll be looking at the practical steps, like what most providers will do, like either if you're staying with a provider or you're switching providers, like how the process will work, and then your top 5 questions answers. So before the Q&A, we've outlined 5 questions that we got quite consistently in the last few weeks. We'll look at those, and then we'll head over to the Q&A, and me, Deborah, and Rachel will do our best to answer your questions as best we can. Okay, so to the Mounjaro price increase. So what happened? It's important to highlight just to start with, so that the price increase, obviously the media loves to do a bit of sensationalist headlining, right? But it was the list price from Eli Lilly that is going to increase from the 1st of September. So that doesn't mean the price you pay with your provider is going to increase to the same extent. So obviously the headlines were around the highest dose going up by 170%. I sincerely doubt any prices in the UK in terms of direct-to-consumer costs will go up by 170%. For example, Second Nature has a direct account with Eli Lilly. We've been negotiating with them. We've got a very good relationship, and our prices won't increase by 170%. It's absolutely not going to happen. So, just to cover that is the list price that Eli Lilly have, and they will, say you're a prescriber, you're a pharmacy, and you go to Eli Lilly to purchase bulk tirzepatide, Mounjaro. That is the list price they will advertise. But most providers, most pharmacies will negotiate a cost based on volume and repeat business, that kind of thing. The main reasons were to align with European markets. So European prices on GLP-1s are more expensive than the UK, so it's to align there. US policy pressure, everyone's probably seen Donald Trump is doing a big push to the pharmaceutical industry to lower the cost of the medication in the US to make it more fair. He feels like the US consumers are getting a bad deal, which is fair enough. Like the US medication in the US is substantially more than the UK, 4 to 5 times, maybe even more. That was a big reason for it for sure. Kind of aligned to the top 2 points, preventing export for profit. So because the list prices and the prices for the medication in the UK were cheaper, some shady characters might want to then export them to foreign countries for greater profit and kind of, undercut Eli Lilly. And whether this is true or not, they did say it was so the UK was contributing a greater extent to their research and development costs. Whether the price, the increased money that they'll take in will go into more research and development, is yet to be seen. But that was one of the reasons that was listed. So is it fair? Well, largely, we don't think it was fair, and we don't really agree with it. But whether we agree with it or not, we can't control it, but we can control with how we respond. So let's have a look at your options. So whether you're on the medication at the moment, or I'm assuming most of the people on this webinar will be people that are on the medication, but it might be there's some people who aren't on GLP-1 medications yet and are looking at Mounjaro and Wegovy, so might be considering what your options are if the price is going to increase. So still applicable. So broadly speaking, there's 4 options for most people. You can carry on. So depending on your provider, the prices increase will vary dramatically, I'd imagine. But for example, at Second Nature, we've frozen prices until October. Excuse me. So that gives our membership some time to kind of just settle into the situation and gives them more space so there's not a very sudden increase in cost. And we're aiming to limit price increases as much as possible and absorbing some of the costs. So hopefully for most people, carrying on for now, just to make an informed decision is possible. There's also the possibility of looking at lower doses. So as long as you're losing weight sustainably, around 1 to 2 pounds a week, half a kilogram to a kilogram per week. Arguably, there's no need to move up to the higher doses. And actually, at Second Nature, this was something we were already recommending to our membership. If you're losing weight sustainably at, say, 5 milligrams of Mounjaro, 1 to 2 pounds a week, you're developing healthy habits, you're getting healthier, you're feeling good, you're making progress clinically, and everything else. There's no real reason to move up. So you can also come off the medication. We wouldn't recommend going off cold turkey, if you like stopping immediately. Just clinically, it's not a sensible decision to do with any medication, whether that was blood pressure, type 2 diabetes medication, or GLP-1s. Having a gradual titration pathway is the way forward and is sensible. Or you could switch to Wegovy, which is going to be what we'll be covering next. So it's clinically safe. Wegovy's been around for a bit longer than Mounjaro, so there's more longer term safety trial data. Supports similar weight loss. It is in clinical trials head to head, supports a bit less than Mounjaro on average, but it's vaguely similar. And it has a similar function, as we'll be covering in a minute. And it's important to highlight there's no perfect decision, only what's right for you. So we really encourage people to just not make rash decisions. Speak to your GP, speak to your prescriber, speak to your friends and family if they're involved in your treatment and they're helping support you in that. And just, take your time and decide what's right for you in the long term. Now, for those of you who are considering Wegovy, let's look at the medication in more detail. So Mounjaro versus Wegovy, what is the difference? So before we look at the medication specifically, so I've got a really scratchy throat, so if you can hear my voice breaking out towards the end of the sentences, that's why. I haven't delivered a webinar in a long time. It's really quite grating on the throat. But anyway, so let's look at GLP-1 in more detail. So it's really important to understand how the body kind of regulates hunger, because then that can really help us understand what the medication is doing and how it's working. So then when you look at the comparison between Wegovy and Mounjaro, it will start to make a bit more sense. So let's look at how the gut and brain communicate to manage hunger and fullness. So our hunger and fullness is largely regulated by the gut-brain hunger axis. So it's the two-way communication pathway between your gut and the brain. And the flow of information goes both ways. So the brain communicates with the gut, communicates with the brain. And all of this happens via the vagus nerve, but also by the hormones released in the gut out into the blood, communicates with the brain as well. So let's look at GLP-1, the GLP-1 hormone. How does it work? So when we eat food, let's say we've just eaten overnight oats or a Thai green curry, the food reaches the small intestine, and GLP-1, the hormone, is released by the body, and it will communicate with the brain, and our hunger will go down. However, what happens after that is that there's an enzyme called DPP4. The name is kind of irrelevant. Just know that this enzyme removes GLP-1, from the body, so that you feel hungry in time for your next meal. So I think it's something like within 2 minutes, half of GLP-1 hormone is removed by your body by this enzyme DPP4. So, how does it compare to the GLP-1 medications? So, as we discussed, the GLP-1 hormone is removed from the body by this enzyme DPP4 and is not resistant to it. So within 2 minutes, half of it's already gone. So it gets removed very quickly from the body, and you feel hungry again, maybe in a few hours, or depending on what you eat and what your lifestyle looks like, or your genetics, you might feel hungry again in time for dinner. With the GLP-1 medications, they are resistant to DPP4. So they bypass the removal process, if you like. They don't get removed from the body by DPP4. They mimic the hormone, they're resistant to the enzyme that removes the hormone, and it doesn't get removed as quickly. It stays in your body for much, much longer, reaching higher levels, and you feel fuller for longer. So that's how the medications work. Now, the key difference between Wegovy and Mounjaro is that Wegovy mimics the Wegovy mimics the GLP-1 hormone to lower hunger, and Mounjaro mimics GLP-1 and another hormone called GIP. So Mounjaro has a dual action. Now, GIP is a hormone with similar effects to GLP-1 in the body. It lowers hunger, it helps with blood sugar, it has, some positive impact on fat storage in our fat cells. It does some similar things with some kind of bonus effects, if you like. So the dual action of Mounjaro is the key difference between these two medications, and it's likely the reason why Mounjaro tends to lead to more weight loss. And just to summarize, side by side, very, very similar. Wegovy mimics GLP-1. Mounjaro mimics GLP-1 and GIP, so the dual action. They both lower hunger and cravings. They both improve blood sugar, whereas the average weight loss tends to be lower in Wegovy and a bit higher in Mounjaro. So roughly between 5 and 10%, depending on the trial, depending on the cohort of people. Everyone responds differently to the medication, but on average, there's around a 5 to 10% difference between Wegovy and Mounjaro in terms of weight loss. Okay, so switching to Wegovy, what does this look like? Let's look at how it works. So most providers should follow a similar step-by-step process as this. Excuse me. I look forward to the Q&A so someone else can take over from my voice. But the first step is always a medical assessment. So much like if you're signing up to Second Nature or any other provider, it follows a similar pathway. So there's always the medical assessment and the clinical assessment to start with. So the clinical team will look at your Mounjaro dose, your current Mounjaro dose, how you respond to it, your overall health, your weight loss progress, any previous side effects, any current side effects. So they'll look at the whole profile. They'll then decide, based on this information, the dose that's appropriate for you to switch to. Now, typically, it's recommended to switch to the lowest Wegovy dose. However, depending on your personal situation and what dose of Mounjaro you're on, it is possible to transition to a higher dose of Wegovy. And then they'll agree the timing, right? So, for example, there should be a washout period of around 7 days. I have seen some adverts online about there being no skipping of dosing or anything like that, but it's not really clinically recommended. The clinical guidelines do say it's recommended to allow a 7-day period between injections, just so the Mounjaro can kind of start to leave your body before introducing a new medication to it. And there should be a follow-up every 2 to 4 weeks after you start the new medication. For example, our members on Second Nature have to complete a monthly check-in that goes to the clinical team, and the clinical team review it each month. And yeah. Okay, so final section, your big questions answered. Obviously, as I said at the start, if you do have any questions for the Q&A, please press the Q&A button and put your questions in there. But hopefully these 5 will cover the majority of people's questions. These are the ones that we had through to our health coaches, to our customer support team. If anyone's been on the Reddit forums on Mounjaro as well, you'd have seen a lot of these questions coming through. So the first one is obviously, will it impact my progress? If you've been on Mounjaro for 6 to 12 months and you've been making really good progress, the side effects are low, you're feeling really happy on the medication, and it's getting you to where you want to be, but now you're worried about the price and you're thinking, well, I might have to switch, but will that mean my weight loss will stop? So Wegovy is a medication with over 8 years of clinical data supporting its effectiveness. Like we said, like I've highlighted already, there is on average a 5 to 10% difference with weight loss outcomes. However, most people should see their progress continue on Wegovy, particularly if you've already lost weight on Mounjaro. So if you're already losing weight and you're already cementing those habits and you're making the progress that you want to, there's no reason why the medication, unless you don't respond well to it, there's no reason why it shouldn't continue to support your progress. And yeah, most people should see their progress continue. So we've kind of already covered this, but will you have to switch to the lowest dose? It is in the clinical guidelines and it is recommended with Wegovy to switch to the 0.25, which is the lowest dose, but it's not necessarily the case. So the clinical team or any clinical team at any providers will review your progress, side effect history, and recommend the best dose for you. That might be the middle doses of Wegovy. It's very unlikely to be straight away the highest dose. I think it will always be, we'll speak to Rachel about this at the end of the webinar, but it should typically be the 0.25, 0.5, or maybe the 1 milligram, depending on everything. So yeah, but just a note, starting at the higher dose of Wegovy is considered off-label. Bit of a typo there, sorry. Thought it's considered, though it's considered safe. So it is considered safe, but it is considered off-label because the label of Wegovy follows a titration pathway where you increase your dose from the bottom one up to the top dose after 5 months. So the washout period. So this is the gap between injections that would be recommended. So let's say you're currently on Mounjaro, you take an injection tomorrow, but then next week you switch, you will miss that injection. And then the following week, you'll return to your standard injection protocol, if you like. So it's to reduce the chances of increased side effects and guarantee an easier transition to the new medication. There's always going to be potential increase in side effects and things like that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this little washout period of 7 days between the injections should help make the transition a bit easier. Not to say it will be easy, but it will be easier with a washout period in place. Is Wegovy cheaper? Yes, on average, Wegovy from September will be cheaper and more affordable than Mounjaro across all doses. Like I discussed at the start, Second Nature are currently negotiating with Eli Lilly, for example, so our prices won't be our new prices that will reflect the increase in Mounjaro won't be live on a website until September, October time. And we can't reveal those just yet, but yeah, on average it will be cheaper, and that goes for all providers. Wegovy will now be the more affordable medication than Mounjaro across all doses. So can you switch back to Mounjaro? Let's say you're on Mounjaro at the moment, you decide to switch to Wegovy to give it a go because it's cheaper, it's more affordable, gives you more flexibility with other areas of your life, but you don't make the progress you want, and you decide actually it's worth paying the little extra for Mounjaro because that's what's helping me make the best progress. Then you can switch back. The process will look identical to what we've already covered: medical assessment, agreement on the dose transition, etc. Okay, a final note, and my voice is going hooray because it's cracking up. Okay, so it's important to note that this medication, GLP-1 medications, they're really not a magic pill. We believe there's no point in taking medication unless you also change your habits, and that is at the cornerstone of what we do. The Second Nature approach is we believe that Wegovy and Mounjaro should be viewed as an opportunity to develop a healthy lifestyle that brings us joy, purpose, and fulfillment to our everyday life, because health isn't just about the numbers on the scale. It's not just about what your resting heart rate is or, how many miles you've run on Strava. That's all of that is irrelevant. It's about how you feel. So if health makes you feel better, makes you feel happier, and means that life feels a bit easier, then that's a good thing. That's what to strive for. It's not to lose weight at all costs. It's to live a more purposeful and fulfilling life. So yeah, the goal shouldn't be to lose weight at all costs. We should think, how can I live in a way that will bring me joy? And of course, for many people, losing weight or losing excess body fat down to a certain level will enable greater independence. It will reduce the risk of chronic diseases. And all of those things can lead to a point where we have a more joyful life, but it should always be the priority. Will this make me happier or not? And I think there's a lot in the current diet industry and particularly some companies that are latching on to the diet mentality with these medications in particular, that is potentially promoting the ongoing diet cycle that people have been through already in the past, but now with medication. Go on the medication, come off the medication, put the weight back on, etc. We fundamentally believe the goal should be try and lose weight once. Not once, but one more time. And that means taking it slow. It means focusing on the right things, which is fulfillment, joy, happiness, whatever your values are, right? So what are your reasons for losing weight? And what does weight loss look like in 5 years' time? So in 5 years' time, where do you want to be? Etc. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, often losing weight and improving our health can enable us to live our life to the fullest. And that's what we want to try and promote. It's not about trying to find the medication at the cheapest cost, to be obsessed over numbers on the scale and calorie counting and all that stuff. It's about living a happy and fulfilling life, because that's what we're all here for. So we recommend use this time you have on the medication to your advantage. See it as an opportunity to reset your relationship with food, reset your relationship with hunger, and develop the lifestyle you can sustain in the long run, whether that's on or off the medication. Okay. Thank you. That is the webinar, and I will go over to the Q&A. I'll stop sharing my screen. Actually, before we go to the Q&A, I think I'll just go back very quickly to one of the questions. Yes. Rachel, would you be happy to just expand on this for us? I think it would be good just to get the doctor's perspective on this question. So, switching between doses and things like that. What is your perspective, and what can people expect? And yeah, what is the safest, best path for people?
Yeah, so the safest path is to follow the licensed dosing. So to stop your Mounjaro, let's say on a Monday, and then to start with Wegovy the Monday after on a 0.25 milligram dose. You've got 7 day gap in between injections. That would be the best pathway if you've had lots of side effects with Mounjaro, you had lots of nausea, stomach issues. That would be the most sensible thing for you to do to reduce the risk of you getting side effects with Wegovy.
Okay.
About 50% of people get side effects with Wegovy.
Okay.
If you've been relatively straightforward with your Mounjaro, you maybe had a little bit of nausea, you've been on, say, 7.5 or 10 milligrams for a little while, you've been okay with it, we are able to move you across to a slightly higher dose, so you wouldn't have to start right at the bottom on the 0.25. It is off label, so it's not following the manufacturer's guidance, but it is safe to do that. Um, it does come with a slightly increased risk of side effects because you're going in on a higher dose of one drug versus the other. It's all to do with receptor activation levels for
Mm,
the GLP-1 receptor, basically. So that's why we don't, if you're on 50 milligrams of Mounjaro, we would not put you straight in on 2.4 of Wegovy. Bad
mm,
idea. Definitely going to get side effects because of the different in the receptor activation because of the levels of the hormones in the drugs, if you want the sort of clear, very techie answer.
No, it makes perfect sense. Thank you. And for those of you who don't know what Rachel means by receptor activity, the way the hormone works is I think the way to think about it is it switches on these receptors in the brain and central nervous system and in the gut. And that's how the hormone has its effects. It's kind of like a key. So it opens a door, and the receptors kind of turn on all of the beneficial effects that we see with it. So that's what Rachel's referring to there. That's brilliant. And Deb, have you had anyone in your coaching experience in the last couple of years? I know you've probably had people switch from Wegovy to Mounjaro. I guess I've got two questions. Have you had anyone you're coaching go the other way, so Mounjaro to Wegovy? And then, if not, or if so, the general experience when people switch either way. So, what do you find? How do people settle in? That kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. I have had people switch in both directions. So initially we were working with Wegovy. That was the only option that we had.
Hmm.
And then when Mounjaro became available, it obviously seemed quite appealing to some people that have been on Wegovy because of the better results with weight loss. So I did have some people that opted to move across to Mounjaro. I also had a few members that opted to move to Mounjaro because they were at a plateau with Wegovy. They're on the highest dose and they were on it for quite some time and reached a plateau and they opted to move across as well. I have had people move the other way also. I've had people on Mounjaro that were having side effects and opted to give Wegovy a shot to see if the side effects were lessened. And I've had people improve either direction. So some people seem to get on slightly better with Mounjaro and some people with Wegovy in terms of side effects. So yeah, so I think it is a bit of a, not one size fits all. I think people can respond slightly differently.
That makes sense. Thank you. And when people are switching across, let's say in the examples you've had of people who have struggled with the transition, what are the things you work with them kind of day to day to help with that? And I guess the general time frame off the top of your head, if you have one, between people if they do switch and say they struggle, side effects go up. Is there a time frame typically you see where people it kind of eases off and gets a bit easier? Do you see that?
Not necessarily. Again, I think everyone responds so individually. I can't really kind
Mm.
of pinpoint a specific, period of time that it would take to settle in. But I do find that quite often the side effects crop up for people when they push up the doses a bit
Yeah.
higher than they should have.
Okay.
So when they switch across, quite often they're more cautious and a bit more measured with how quickly they move up the doses. So I do find that people that are a little bit more cautious and take things a bit slower tend to have less side effects, regardless of which medication they're taking.
Nice. That makes sense. And Rachel, from your perspective, is there a general trend in terms of adapting to the new medication? I don't know if in your clinic experience you've seen it before, where people, if there's 2 to 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, is there a general average time frame?
Yeah, it's very similar to Mounjaro, really. So within that first couple of weeks, if you've
Mm,
had side effects to begin with, within that first couple of weeks, they normally do settle. Um, the advice tends to be stick with it because they do settle. Some people can feel a little bit more nauseous, and that the side effects, like for like, they could be maybe a little bit worse with the Wegovy. But if you stick with it, they do settle. And we are advocating to go in on a slightly lower dose of Wegovy to mitigate against that, because we don't want people feeling, horribly sick and things like that, because that's just not
mm,
pleasant for everybody.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, we're going, go conservatively and get it right rather than going too high and cause trouble is our
Yes.
approach.
Absolutely. Makes perfect sense. Thank you. Um, and in terms of, this was another question I wanted to ask you, Rachel. In terms of the washout period, I guess, like 7 days, is that been set by the National Institute for Care and Excellence, the NICE? Is it come from the NHS? Is that come from Eli Lilly? Where has this been set?
So this is based on pharmacology, and it's
Okay.
all to do with half-lives of drugs and how quickly they degrade in the body.
Okay.
That's what that is based on, basically, that the Mounjaro will degrade within the 7-day period and be out of your system. So you're okay then to reintroduce the Wegovy at that point.
I've got you. I've got you. Because when I first saw this, I was surprised. It seemed because of the strength of the medication. Let's say if someone's been on it for a year, it did surprise me that 7 days was enough for the drug to
Yeah.
release. But that's been shown, I imagine. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Super interesting. All right, brilliant. I think, yeah, we've covered the switching back. Quick question for you, Deb. Have you seen, have you worked with anyone who has switched again? So either Wegovy to Mounjaro, then back to Wegovy, or anything like that. Have you seen that in your with our members?
Not off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone that has switched and switched back. No,
Fair enough. Maybe that will come in the coming months.
possibly,
But
yes.
but
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, team. Well, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so I can see you both and I can see the comments. So there are some questions in the chat, which is brilliant. Thank you for sending those through. We will get to those. But I'm going to prioritize the questions in the Q&A for now. So to Rachel, I mean, I think side effects are going to be a common thread in the question. So I think that's definitely something we should address. We've already discussed it a little bit, but Leslie's asking if we could expand on the overlap in side effects. So is there consistent side effects that we see in both? Do Wegovy or Mounjaro have some side effects that they're more likely to trigger, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so really good question. If you've had side effects with Mounjaro, the chances are you will probably get similar side effects with Wegovy. If you had zero side effects with Mounjaro, probably you'll be okay when you go over to Wegovy and have fewer side effects. The side effects are basically the same, gastrointestinal in the main, so nausea, diarrhea, constipation, are the main ones. And as I've said before, we don't want to go in at a dose that's too high and trigger those side effects. So we would rather go in at a lower dose, get everything stable and under control, and then increase once we were happy with everything.
That
Um,
makes sense. That makes sense. And Deb, I suppose with your experience, um, when people have switched, are the side effects you've seen similar? So if someone on Wegovy, let's say, experiences nausea more than anything, do you s- do we see a similar trend when they go to Mounjaro, or is it likely? Rachel's nodding her head, so I think that's great. Rachel has some insights. But yeah, is it likely to be similar, or would it be different?
I think in theory it makes sense that it would be given the mechanism behind them. I just have one of my members spring into my mind that was on Wegovy and they had a bad time with Wegovy but tolerated Mounjaro much better and didn't have side effects. So that was just
Okay.
one example, but
Okay.
again, that's just one individual. And yeah, I think it really does vary, but um, I think it does pay to be quite slow and cautious with it and just make sure that you're very, very settled on a dose before moving up
That makes
regardless of the medication.
That makes sense. Rachel, anything to add on that point?
Yeah, it's just worth bearing in mind they're not both. If you think of apples and pears, they're not both apples.
Yes.
Mounjaro is an apple and Wegovy is a pear. They're not the same. So whilst they've both got the GLP-1 hormone in it, it isn't the same. So in Wegovy, it's almost like a stronger version of the
Mm,
GLP. So sort of dose for dose, you're getting more response with Wegovy, and
mm,
that's why you can sometimes get slightly more side effects with Wegovy because that GLP part of the drug is firing off more.
mm.
And that's why you can sometimes get more side effects. So yeah, just think of them as they're both, off a tree, but one is an apple and one is a pear. And they're
Yeah.
similar, but they're not the same.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I like that metaphor. That's good. Sue, I've noticed you've asked quite a specific question around your treatment. So I think I'll just recommend that you speak to the clinical team and your health coach. I think in regards to this webinar, we're really trying to provide broad educational information around the medication and the side effects in this transition. But if you do have, I would copy and paste the question you've sent to us, put it to your health coach, maybe ring up the clinical team and speak to them about it. And I think that goes to everyone, just so you know, we're not here to provide individualized advice on this situation, just broad educational information. So sorry, Sue, I won't be able to answer your question. I hope that's okay. So Catherine is asking about supply issues because there might be a lot of people switching to Wegovy at Second Nature. So we have a direct account with Novo Nordisk, and we have an ongoing relationship that's been which has been we've had it for a good 2 to 3 years. So in terms of stock with Second Nature, we're very secure. Basically, we can almost guarantee our supply ongoing. So there's no issues on our side there.
It's just worth adding on that one that the stock issues with Wegovy that happened a couple of years ago were because Novo Nordisk didn't have enough factories. They have since built lots of factories, so
Yeah.
their production lines are a lot more robust.
That's good to know. That's good to know. Yeah, I do remember that a few years ago. That was a difficult time for many people. So Vince is just asking a follow-up question for the washout period. So by having a 7 day washout period, there's a 2 week gap between the injections. Is that right?
No, 7 days. So inject on the Monday, Mounjaro levels decline over the 7 days, inject on the Monday again. So the washout is 7 days in between injections. So it's as if you were continuing with your Mounjaro, basically.
Got you. Okay, brilliant. Sorry, I think I misspoke when I was presenting that, but there's actually
It's a bit confusing, yeah.
yeah. So the 7 day washout period is almost as if you were continuing the following week, but you just
Yeah,
got
so what you wouldn't do is have your Mounjaro on the Monday and go, oh, I'm going to switch to Wegovy. I'm going to take that on the Tuesday.
got you, got you. But effectively, there's a continuation of your treatment.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Excellent. Okay, so so I just scanning through the questions. So someone's asking about how they get started discussing the switchover. Rachel, if people are like with Second Nature or with their providers, what is the best thing to do? The first step. What should they do? What approach should they
So
take?
I believe the best thing to do would be to contact our customer support team, who
Mm,
have got a whole system set up ready to go, with various emails and communications that can go out to people to gather the information that we need to decide if we want to switch you over or if it's sensible to switch you over, and then that gets relayed onto our clinical team. So if you just reach out to customer support through support at Second Nature, they will hit that trigger and it will go from there, basically.
makes sense. Makes sense. And I'd imagine if anyone is unsure and wants information, just reaching out to their health coach, or if you're with other providers, reaching out to your prescriber, maybe
Yeah.
you're getting support elsewhere. That'd be great. We're getting a lot of questions around, to be fair, we're getting a lot of questions around the pricing. I think just to highlight to everyone, our pricing hasn't been confirmed yet. We're hoping to confirm to our existing members around mid-September. We can't give you a ballpark figure at the moment. All I can say is we're still negotiating with Eli Lilly, and I imagine everyone else is still doing the same thing. Um, But what I can guarantee is it won't be 170%. So Second Nature, most of the industry, I'd imagine, are going to be absorbing some of the costs of this price increase. So it won't be 170%. It will be much more reasonable, and hopefully for most people, it will still be affordable. Yeah, what's the pricing for Wegovy? So yeah, any questions around specific pricing? All I can encourage people to do is head over to the Second Nature website. You'll be able to find more information about specific pricing on the different medications on there. Cool. I think there's a couple of questions in the chat. So I think this is quite a good question from Eugene, Rachel, to start with. I'll put this to you. So they're just asking to please clarify, because obviously I kind of done a quite a quick overview looking at the different mechanisms of the medications, but they're just asking, could you please clarify the science between the doses of both products? So you mentioned earlier about the apples and pears and Wegovy being the stronger medication. So I think if I'm getting your question right here, Eugene, could you please expand on that? Because obviously Wegovy's dosing it sounds smaller, so then people get this impression that it's weaker because it's the smaller volume. But actually, you mentioned earlier Wegovy is the stronger drug, but it's available in smaller doses. So could you explain that in more detail?
Yeah, so I'm going to use your lock and key analogy. So if you imagine Mounjaro has got some keys for the GLP-1, and they will only unlock half of the door of the GLP-1 door. So Wegovy's only got half the keys for the doors. Mounjaro's only got half the keys for the doors. Wegovy has got maybe 90% of the keys for the doors. So Wegovy could go in and it can unlock more of those doors, so it can activate more of those receptors for the GLP-1. So it has more action. So the same volume, if you like, of the drugs, the Wegovy one has got more keys in it, so it can go and do more stuff. It's a bit more active, if that makes sense, than the Mounjaro one. The Mounjaro obviously has then got another set of doors with the GIP one, so it's kind of like a double effect. But the Wegovy one, it's more potent. It's probably is a way to think about it. The chemical in it is more potent, so that's why the dose is. You might think, well, why is 15 milligrams of Mounjaro the same as 2.4 of Wegovy? That doesn't seem to make sense. Well, again, it's because it's apples and pears and different keys and doors. Does that make sense, or have I just overcomplicated it?
Robbie, you're on mute.
So I was just typing an answer to someone, that's why. But that makes sense, Rachel. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, so I think, so I think on side effects again, because I think this is an issue for people. So we've already discussed the side effect profiles roughly. But to Rachel first, is there because someone's asking that it seems that Wegovy has more stomach and digestive side effects. Is that true? What is the rate of, is the percentage of people getting side effects on both medications the same? Is it different? Do more people have to stop taking the medication either side? What is it? What's the science tell us there?
So this, about I said before, for about 50% of people on Wegovy will get side effects. Most of the time, most of those people, that will be mild. So mild nausea, a little bit of diarrhea, sometimes constipation, and it does normally settle within the first 2 to 4 weeks of being on the drug. So stick with it and persevere. What we would never do is increase the dose if you were still having side effects. We would, keep the dose the same because we wouldn't want to trigger any more side effects. Do you get more side effects with Wegovy than Mounjaro? I think you probably do in reality. But again, if we get the titration across right, that should be minimal. The goal would be that actually we didn't do that because we're putting you on a dose of Wegovy that's not going to do the same because you've had the Mounjaro, you've dealt with those side effects, they've been done. Okay, let's go with a sort of equivalent of Wegovy so that we don't trigger all of that side effect profile again. That's the goal.
That makes sense. And Deb, in your practice with people, have you seen any great differences? I know we kind of paused our Wegovy program for a while, but did you notice a shift when we launched our Mounjaro program with Wegovy? Was there a great difference, or generally was it quite similar? Did you notice anything?
In terms of side effects?
Yeah.
I didn't particularly notice anything outstanding. I do deal with quite a few side effects, and I've dealt with them for both medications. There's also quite a large percentage of people that have very, very minimal side effects on both medications. So it's really, yeah, it's hard for me to say exactly the percentage that
Mm,
are, experiencing side effects in either, because obviously the people that reach out to me are the ones that are experiencing the side effects. Um,
makes sense.
yeah, really difficult to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Cool. That's great. So, I do have a question here about pre-diabetes and the medications. Rachel, from your clinical perspective, obviously don't want to be providing any direct medical advice here, but broadly
Yeah.
speaking, for people living with pre-diabetes, is there clinical guidance around preference for which medication?
With
That
clinical trials, and bear in mind, these are clinical trials, so whilst the evidence is good, it's not real life.
mm,
So yes, clinical trials have shown that Mounjaro has a is a slightly better on effects on cholesterol and blood sugars than Wegovy. However, it is clinical trial data, and that it's very fixed conditions. So
mm,
how that translates into the real world is still actually under investigation.
yes.
Nobody really fully knows. The thing to say with Wegovy is that Wegovy is actually licensed for other things now because
Mm,
it's been around for a lot longer. The semaglutide is actually licensed for cardiovascular disease and things like that now. So whereas Mounjaro hasn't got those licenses yet,
mm,
I suspect they will come from
yeah.
Mounjaro. But Wegovy, from the clinical trial data, is better for pre-diabetes. That doesn't mean that Wegovy with a really good behavioral change, diet approach, lifestyle changes wouldn't be as good as Mounjaro.
Yes.
It's basically drug versus drug. What happens? It's not drug plus lifestyle. It's in the clinical trial, so you
Got
kind
you.
of tell it's not really real world stuff.
Got you. So based on the clinical trial data we have at the moment, Mounjaro tends to lead to more blood sugar reductions and insulin improvements than Wegovy, from what we've
Yes.
seen. That makes sense. Thank you. Laura, quick question. Yes, so says you went to Wegovy, you went from Wegovy to Mounjaro. Am I okay to still go back? So yeah, you can switch between the medications. Rachel, on that point, because that is a question that does keep coming up, and obviously we did discuss it and we said we can do it. But what is your perspective on switching back? So let's say people decide I'm switching to Wegovy, I'm going to give it a go. It's much cheaper, but then it doesn't really work for them. They consider switching back. What is your clinical perspective on that practice? Would it be okay? Would people tolerate it?
So again, it would be almost like the reverse of what you've done for Wegovy. You probably wouldn't go back onto the same dose of Mounjaro. It would depend on what dose of Wegovy you were on, the side effects, and so on and so forth. Um, but it would be basically the same with the 7-day washout and back over onto a dose of Mounjaro. And it may be that you don't have to start back on the 2.5. You probably wouldn't be going in on a sort of 10 or 15 milligram dose, but it would be, sort of in those bottom ranges. And again, it would be on a case by case basis, discussion with the clinical team, etc., etc.
Makes sense. And in your clinical practice, have you seen anyone who or know anyone that's done that sort of double switch?
Um, no, because most people have gone Wegovy to Mounjaro when Mounjaro
Hmm.
came out. Not a lot of people went to Wegovy and then back to Mounjaro. So this is all new for a lot of providers, well, for most people actually.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Cool. Very good question here from Laura, and this I think is a very pertinent topic. But what is the impact of these medications on the menstrual cycle and or the menopause? Um, I know, Deborah, I think we were having some chats around this a while ago around the research. I'm not sure if you've got any perspectives on it. Maybe Rachel, will start with you. Do you know of any data or any clinical perspectives on the impact of these medications on the menstrual cycle and the menopause?
So the main thing to bear in mind with menstrual cycle and menopause is HRT and contraception.
Mm,
And there are guidance from the Royal College of Gynecologists and so on around HRT preparations and contraception, which I won't go into the details of, but essentially you just need to be careful with your doses because the slower gastric emptying caused by the drugs can reduce the effectiveness of contraception. And if you're taking progesterone orally for your HRT, it can reduce the effectiveness of that. So talk to your GP or your clinical team. There is some advice on our website, I think, about how to manage your HRT doses and contraception doses. In terms of the symptoms and side effects and things with the menstrual cycle, obviously weight loss has a bearing and an impact on all of your hormones.
Mm.
We know that fat stores are a releaser of estrogen. So again, yes, it can have an impact. I would say probably a positive impact rather than a negative one with the weight loss. And it can, as you lose weight, periods can regulate. They become fertility and that sort of stuff can improve with weight loss. So yes, absolutely, they can have an effect on those two things.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And Deb, what's your perspective on that? And I know you had some members recently who had reported changes in their menstrual cycle when being on the medication.
Yeah, it's definitely something that has cropped up occasionally. I wouldn't say it's very common in what I've had reported, but it has come up from time to time. And a couple of things that have been reported to me have been postmenopausal bleeding. So women who've gone that 12 months without a period and then have had a bleed. Um, and changes in the cycle. So for women that were having a bleed every 28 days, that might shift slightly. And as Rachel said, some of that could be due to weight loss. And it could be due to, change in hormones. I don't know, Rachel, if you have any other thoughts on what might cause a bleed post-menopause.
Um, Depends if you're on HRT or not. If you're on HRT, it may be to do with the progesterone absorption, particularly if you're having that orally.
Mm.
Um, I don't know is the honest answer. It'll be probably related to effects around the pituitary axis, and the response of the pituitary hormone axis to the weight loss, affecting the release of various different sex hormones, triggering that. I'd have to do a bit of research and come back to you on the specifics of that one.
Excellent. Thanks, team. I think that's really informative. Um, Okay, I know we do have a question, Verity, around the dose strength of the medications, but I think we have already, hopefully, we've covered that in enough detail. I know Rachel did, we did discuss that. Maybe we'll come back to that if we've got time before the end. Um, Now we're getting quite a few questions in. What should people like from our members? What should they do? Should they wait until October for the pricing? I think I would recommend putting these questions to any specific questions around your treatment to the health coach and the clinical team, or even customer support. If you've got questions around deliveries and things like that, please send those through. In terms of broadly speaking, we've frozen the prices in September to give people more time. So rather than the prices going up immediately and people having to make a very snap decision, we've frozen the pricing in September so that the prices don't increase until October. And then, people might want to make a decision. For our membership, we will be confirming prices around mid-September. And again, that gives people enough time, hopefully, to make, an informed decision on their treatment after that. So I hope that all makes sense. So Heather's asking Rachel, I think probably a follow-up question. This is interesting around the added licensing around Wegovy and the effects of the medication now being licensed for, say, cardiovascular disease. She's asking, could you expand a little more on the health benefits of Mounjaro versus Wegovy, whether there's similarities there, what the clinical trials say, what they're licensed for now? If you could expand.
Yeah, so the health benefits are broadly similar. The only reason that Wegovy is now licensed in cardiovascular disease is because it's been around for longer, and so they've got a lot more trial data
Yeah,
around Wegovy, and that's why it's got those licenses. As I say, Mounjaro, they are testing these drugs in everything. Kidney disease, heart failure, all sorts of stuff. So there's clinical trials going on in all of it. Um, both cause weight loss, both lower cholesterol, both can reduce blood sugars. And those three things alone are significant to reduce your risk of cancers, to improve your mental health, to reduce your risk of osteoarthritis. The health benefits of those three things alone are profound. So don't underestimate, the effects of weight loss, the effect of becoming a healthy weight, is massive on your body. It's not just that you're thinner. it's huge in lots of things. It reduces your levels of inflammation and so on. So yeah, it's yeah, massive basically.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely. And Deb, what are some of the I think in this webinar we talked a lot about weight loss and of the sort of cardiovascular, the physical benefits of these medications. But obviously, as I discussed at the end, like our approach at Second Nature, right, is all about overall lifestyle and well-being. Could you sort of summarize some of the non-scale victories that people are having on the program on these medications? It's not because, it's not just about the numbers on the scale, right? What else
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
we
Yeah.
seeing? And you've been with Second Nature for 6 years now, so
Yeah,
you've probably
sure.
seen
Yeah.
had some amazing stories.
Yeah, and that's the bit that really excites me. It's when somebody messages you and says, I was housebound and couldn't go for a walk or couldn't do anything, and I've just come back from a 5 kilometer walk with my dog. It's those kind of stories that really excite me as a health coach. And there are just, so many stories of people that are more active, they're suddenly enjoying exercise. They just can do more with their lives and just have greater enjoyment of life because they feel better and they're more able to do things and they have less body pain. Often people will say they've got less IBS symptoms or less, other issues going on in their body. So those things are huge. And, as Rachel said, the main effects are not just in what you see on the outside, it's what's going on the inside and internally, which is, yeah, really exciting.
Absolutely. Is there one particular story, obviously not naming names, but is there one particular story that stands out for you and the people you've worked with over the past couple of years?
Um, yeah, I think that one I just mentioned, it was
Mm,
somebody who wrote to me and said I was literally housebound. I just couldn't leave my home because I was so overweight and in so much
mm.
pain. And they just come back from a 5 mile walk with their dog, and the
Wow.
joy in that of just being outside in nature with their dog, just doing something that a lot of us take for granted. Just yeah, that just really stuck in my mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing. So there are more questions around side effects and things like that. I think most of the questions left over we've either covered to some extent, or I would recommend people putting them into the Second Nature website, like or into Google. Just put Second Nature and then your question. We've probably got a guide on it. So someone's asked about the hair loss on the medications. We've got articles on our website discussing those. So please have a look at that. And generally speaking, if anyone does have any questions after this, what are Second Nature's thoughts on this topic? We've probably got an article on it, particularly around Wegovy and Mounjaro. So please check out our website there. Just in the last final 5 minutes, I think it would be really great to switch focus on the topic of non-scale victories, Deb and Rachel. I think it'd be great to talk about the long term. So I know we've only got 5 minutes left, so we don't want to get into too much detail because it's a webinar in and of itself, to be honest. But it is obviously something that people think about. They're taking these medications. Some people are thinking I'll be on these for life. Other people are thinking I want to come off. So, what are your perspectives on that, and what does it look like for people on Second Nature, and things like that? So, yeah, maybe Rachel, you can kick us off. What are your perspectives on long-term use of the medication or people coming off? Yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I love my analogies. I sort of talk to people about your body is the garden, and you've got a set of tools to go make your garden nice, and you've got a lawnmower and secateurs and shears and weed killer and all that sort of stuff. And Manjaro and Wegovy are one set of tools in that whole toolbox for the garden. And to start with, the garden will be overgrown and a complete mess. And
Yeah.
you'll go out and you'll do lots of hacking, and you might need all of those tools to get the garden back under control. And then you've got your garden looking nice and the flowers are growing and the grass is cut. And
Mm,
then you might just need to use those tools now and again to keep things going. And hopefully with Second Nature, you don't need to use the massive shears anymore, which you could say are the weight loss medications, for example, because you've got your nice secateurs with your behavioural changes that you can go and just keep things
mm,
pruned and keep things in check as you go along. So I think that's how I explain it to people. The
yeah.
drugs, they are, some people will go on and off and they will yo-yo backwards and forwards. We like to work with people to use the drugs with the behavioral change to get to a place where you think things are manageable and then to gradually take the drugs out of the toolbox so that you can manage the garden without having to have those kind of like industrial shears going on.
Mm.
And
Make-
that's my thoughts on it.
I think that's a great analogy. That makes perfect sense. We're gonna have to put that in the content, I think. Deborah, I know you've been working with people who, well, have been on the medications for a couple of years now, I'd imagine. And I think you've worked with people that are transitioning off, but also people that are maintaining at a lower dose, um, and plan to stay on it for a bit longer. Could you expand on your experience with people there? What tend to be the reasons people choose either way? How do people manage? Yeah, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I love Rachel's analogy. When I work with people, I again try to get them to think of their own individual scenario. And I think from my perspective, it depends on people's history and it depends how much weight they've had to lose and how far they've had to come and their own personal confidence in their ability to then maintain that with or without the medication. Um, I definitely work with some people who feel like if they stopped the medication completely, they would find it really difficult to
Mm.
maintain that, at least at the moment. That might change in time. And I think it has to be constantly, revisited and readdressed. And other people, I'd say the majority of people come in thinking, I'm going to take this for X period of time or until I reach X weight. And when I then reach that weight, I will consider tapering off the medication and seeing what happens when I go it alone. So I would say for the majority of people, they tend to come in thinking of it as a short-term aid, with a few people considering it as more of a long-term aid for them.
Makes perfect sense. That's great. I think that rounds it off perfectly. We're at 7 o'clock basically. So, Deb, Rachel, before we finish up, have you got any final comments for everyone who's still here?
No?
I think, yeah, just one thing that crops up for me a lot is as a health coach, one of the most common things we get is, I'm feeling hungry, this isn't working.
Mm,
We get that again with both medications. But just a reminder that the medication isn't there to kind of obliterate your appetite. It's there to kind of calm your appetite.
yes.
So not going for like 100% no hunger. We want you to feel some hunger.
Mm.
And that stands for whatever medication you're on. We want you to still enjoy food, to still nourish your body and still enjoy the act of eating because that's really, really important.
100%. I think that's a really good point, and I think it's probably something we should do more on the program in particular is focusing on that relationship with hunger rather than treating it like our
The enemy.
rather than an enemy, it's an ally in most circumstances. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Deborah. Thank you. And yeah, thanks, Deb. Thanks, Rachel. Absolutely brilliant to have you and really insightful. Thanks everyone for attending. We will be putting this webinar up on YouTube and we'll be sending around the email of the link to YouTube via email to everyone who attended. And if you're on the Second Nature program, we'll be sharing it in your group chat as well. So yeah, and I would just encourage people, if you've got any specific questions around your treatment, speak to a health coach, speak to the clinical team, speak to the customer support team. They'll be on hand to help you. For anyone who isn't a Second Nature member, check out our website, have a look through our articles, and then if you've got any other questions, you can reach out to our team. All right, that's amazing. Have a good evening, everyone, and yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.